In the 20th century, the vampire image has changed. In the 19th century, the vampire was very much the monster. Perhaps the epitome of that image, I think, is the 1922 film Nosferatu. The creature in that film is clearly a monster. Long, talon-like fingernails. And almost rodent-like teeth. Really an ugly, horrible creature. That all changes after Nosferatu. When we see the 1927 stage play, this is really the watershed. The widow of Bram Stoker agreed to allow Hamilton Dean and John Balderston to write a stage play based on the book called Dracula. It was first staged in England, and it was very successful. To the surprise, the critics didn't much like it, but it was amazingly popular, and it eventually came to the States. Here in America, it starred a young Austro-Hungarian actor named Bela Lugosi, who had what I call almost the lounge lizard look. This romantic, seductive figure. Total change from the Nosferatu image of the vampire. And of course, the stage play here was eventually made into the 1931 film starring Lugosi, which perpetuated that image, and it's been all downhill since then. The vampire has become the attractive, romantic, outsider, loner, appealing to women, and an empathetic character. Poor Dracula. Poor vampire who's misunderstood. Yes, he kills people, but you know, we all have to do what we have to do to survive. So, True Blood, which is based on a wonderful series of books by my friend Charlene Harris, is the television show's a little different from the books, but yes, at least that shows the contrast. There are bad vampires and there are good vampires in that series, at least. There are vampires who are rotten people and love preying on others, and there are vampires struggling against their nature. I did not like the Twilight series of books or film. To me, they totally emasculate the idea of the vampire. I said, one of my better lines, I thought, was, you know, if you had immortal life, would you choose to spend it in high school? They make the vampire into this very glamorous, noble, romantic creature who, in fact, struggles not to bite anybody. In the books, and it's very little about blood and sucking and vampires. It's really more about outsiders. In doing my annotated Dracula, I did not want this to be the English major's annotated version. I'm not a psychologist, I'm not an academic, so I cut the Gordian's knot and shoved all of those subtexts into an appendix. Called something like Dracula Among the Academics or something like that. I think I called it Sex, Lies, and Dracula. It explores in this appendix the sexual subtexts, but there are so many others. There are subtexts, for example, about the fears, the genuine fears in England of the invasion of Eastern European immigrants. The Jews coming to Europe, coming to England, the Irish coming to England. And so you have all of these metaphors, plus there's also a great battle in the book between technology and superstition, sort of modern times and old times. So you have all of those themes working in the book Dracula. And yes, it's one of those wonderful manuscripts where if you have a subtext that you're fond of, you'll probably find it in Dracula. If you write a horror book that is attempting to deliver a particular theme, it's bad to do bad things to the environment, and therefore the pollution, the polluted grass starts eating people. It's going to be a boring book. If it's a book that's an honest book, there will be plenty of subtext for everybody. I guess that's my feeling. I was able to draw on a lot of my experience in annotating the Sherlock Holmes books because Dracula is exactly a contemporary of Holmes. The book was published, Dracula was published in 1897. The events in the story took place, there's some debate about exactly when, but probably the late 1880s or possibly as late as 1893, some scholars argue. That's Holmes's day. I like to think that they walk the streets of London together. I don't take credit for being a deep thinker about these subjects. I'm an annotator. I have a facile understanding of many subjects, just enough to boil it down into an interesting summary and stick it into a footnote. This appeals to my superficial mind. I'm interested in so many things, and I wanted to share that passion for so many interesting things with other readers and show them that those things are here. So, for example, I mean, as I go through these texts and try and decide what to footnote, it has to be something that I say to myself, that's really cool, that's really interesting. So one of my favorite things, for example, in Dracula, I was asked to do a reading from my writing about Dracula. I said, reading? You mean like read a footnote? I said, well, yeah. Okay, so I picked out one that I thought at least was interesting. There's a scene in the manuscript that actually was cut from the published book. There's minor spoilers here. Dracula, when he comes to England, his ship lands in Whitby, way up in the north of England, and everyone on the ship is dead. And a large black dog leaps off the ship and runs off through the town. Now, later, some of the people in the town find a neighborhood dog that's had its throat ripped out. And in the newspaper article about this strange event of the ship with the dead crew and all that coming, the reporter says that the police are considering looking at the dog's eyeballs to try and determine who murdered this dog. Now, you say, what is that? Why would they look at the dog's eyeballs? Well, there was a crackpot theory in Victorian science that the retina retained the image, the last image that it saw in death. And if you looked at the eyeballs of a murder victim, you could see photographed there, like a pinhole camera, the image of the murderer committing the murder. And there was a scientist who investigated this, and he called this optography. And he did experiments on little bunny rabbits to kill them and see what images would be retained on the retina and all that. It didn't really work, but it was such a cool idea. And in fact, an idea adopted in several other works of fiction. Jules Verne, for example, puts it into a mystery novel, and it's the solution of the mystery. They investigate the eyeball. So I read it, and it's a little tiny snippet that was cut out of the manuscript, and I made it into this long footnote because it interested me. And I thought other readers would look at that and say, wow, that's really kind of cool. So no excuse for things like that. It's not really adding to our body of knowledge about things, but I think it's interesting.